Hello, I'm Isabel. Once, during a formal family dinner held at an upscale restaurant with chandeliers and polished silverware, my brother suddenly raised his voice and called me a beggar in front of everyone. The rest of the family, seated comfortably in their designer clothes, simply turned their heads and looked the other way, pretending nothing had happened. He laughed mockingly, his voice loud and cruel, while the others remained silent, their eyes fixed elsewhere, as if I didn't even exist. They erased my name, methodically and without hesitation, from legal documents, family group chats, cherished photo albums, and even from the final version of my mother's handwritten will. But what hurt more wasn't being excluded. It was realizing they had planned it all along. When I arrived 15 minutes late, the valet didn't notice me and asked twice who I was there to see. When I muttered, "A reservation under Carter," he handed me the parking ticket like I was a suspicious stranger crashing someone else's party. The restaurant was all glass and brass, filled with too many shadows. The kind of place people chose to be seen. Beyond the Golden Arch, I found the main dining room. There they were, my family, laughing over wine, posed as perfectly as a magazine spread. My sister Selena sat in the center, her navy dress shimmering. Beside her was my brother Logan, with a smile as stiff and fake as armor. Her daughter, my niece, leaned forward to whisper something with a sneer. As I approached, her sneer turned into words. "That's her," the girl said, not bothering to lower her voice. "The one mom helps like a charity case." I stopped walking and instinctively smiled. The kind of smile you give when someone steps on your foot and it's too impolite to scream. No one turned to greet me. I walked to the nearest waiter and tried to keep my voice low and calm. "Excuse me, I am booked under the name Carter." He hesitated, looked toward the back, and then Logan appeared. "Isabel," he said, like speaking to a neighbor's barking dog. "I didn't expect you to come." "I RSVP'd," I said quietly. He laughed. "Next time, confirm with someone who matters." After he said that, he turned to the waiter, to the guests, to the whole room, and spoke louder. "We don't have room for beggars. Why don't you try a downtown shelter?" Laughter followed. It was polite, restrained, but unmistakable. I didn't wince. I didn't cry. I nodded and walked past him, like I was simply heading to the restroom. My heart was pounding, but my face stayed calm. No one followed me. I found a quiet corner near a window that showed nothing. Only my reflection looked back at me. Too well dressed to be pitied. Too invisible to be welcomed. They had done this before, in smaller ways. An invitation that never arrived. Photos where I was cropped out. Group messages I wasn't in. But this was a declaration. I thought of my mother. Even if the world turns its back on you, your family will hold you up. She never lived to see this version of the family. Or maybe she chose not to see it. I heard a toast I wasn't part of. Smelled the roast beef I was not invited to taste. Felt the erasure sink deep into my bones. When I finally turned to leave the room, I didn't shout, cry, or throw anything. I didn't create a scene or give them the satisfaction of seeing me unravel, because I knew that would only entertain them, give them something to whisper about later. In the heavy silence of the driver's seat, surrounded by the hum of the engine and my own racing thoughts, I reached into my purse and found a small ivory envelope, still sealed, untouched since it was handed to me months ago. Its edges were slightly worn from time, but I held it tightly in my hand, clutching it like a blade, and whispered through gritted teeth, "Never again." I didn't drive back home. I didn't even think about going there. Instead, I ended up parked near White Rock Lake, beneath a sky smeared with faint stars and the quiet rustle of wind in the trees. At this hour, the place was still and nearly deserted, the kind of loneliness that wrapped around you without asking permission. It wasn't the first time I had felt completely invisible, even while surrounded by people who shared my blood, my history, my last name. But something about tonight, about the sharpness of my niece's words, the casual cruelty, the absolute certainty in Logan's face as he humiliated me without fear of consequence, cut deeper than usual. And the worst part was, he was right about nobody expecting me to come. No one stopped him. No one said a word. I found an old wooden bench by the edge of the lake and sat down slowly, the cold of the slats pressing against my back as I stared into the still water. My thoughts drifted to the family album that Selena's assistant had delivered just a few days earlier, wrapped in a ribbon and smelling faintly of lavender. The pages were filled with glossy, high-definition images. Holidays in color-coordinated outfits. Birthday parties with matching cakes. Vacation snapshots from tropical beaches. But as I flipped through each polished page, every picture where I should have been, where I had been in reality, felt distorted. Wrong. Like someone had carved me out with a knife and pasted in a version of the family that existed without me. In one, I was a blur in the background. In another, my face was cropped out, only my hand visible. On the final page, the Carter family, our legacy, I was not mentioned. It wasn't an oversight. It was a revision. Just hours ago at the restaurant, I had arrived on time. The reservation desk staff tapped their iPad with a confused look. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your name isn't on the confirmed list." I responded weeks ago. "I have the email right here." She didn't look. She just said, "I'll check with your family," and never came back. There was no seat, no plate, no napkin for me. I watched from across the room as Logan toasted with our father. Laughter. Clinking glasses. Selena never looked at me once. He wasn't ignoring me. He was pretending I didn't exist. It was a cruelty that left no bruises. Was it new? Or had it been built for years? I thought back to past holidays. Group texts that didn't include my name. Events where I was introduced only as Selena's sister. Each small omission was a brick, until a wall stood around me. And the truth struck. They hadn't forgotten me. They were erasing me. Back home, I went straight to the bookshelf and dug through drawers. Old files, envelopes, documents I hadn't touched in years. Contracts, signatures, records. Things I shouldn't have kept but always knew I might need. That night I didn't sleep. I spread the papers out on the floor and studied everything they'd tried to take. "If there's no seat for me at their table," I whispered, "then I'll build a table they can't ignore." That night I stopped mourning my family and started auditing them. Late at night, I found a box labeled Taxes 2009 on the top shelf of the hallway closet and pulled out a green folder. It held my mother's original estate documents. I sat on the floor and read through everything again. The original will had a Section 4. It clearly stated that part of the family estate was to be left to me. My name, Isabel Carter, was typed out explicitly. But the revised version of the will, read aloud by the lawyer at the funeral, had no Section 4. The copy was dated and notarized just weeks before my mother was hospitalized. But the version read at the funeral bore a signature dated 3 days before she died. It wasn't an omission. It was an edit. At 2 a.m., I sent an email to my mother's former paralegal, Madeline Brooks. "Madeline, do you know if any changes were made to my mother's will during the last 30 days of her life?" By morning, I had a reply. Isabel, you might want to check the access logs. Something was altered remotely on a Saturday night. That's all I can say. Saturday night. Flipping through my planner, I saw I was in Toronto for work that weekend with no phone signal. I hadn't even known my mother had been moved to hospice. By the time I came home, she had already been buried. And it was that exact weekend when someone edited the will. I didn't need to guess who. The next morning, I drove to our family home. Selena was away on a retreat in Palm Springs. The housekeeper, Marissa, let me in without a word when I lied and said I was picking up a book my mother had promised me. I walked down the hallway to the portrait wall. Our family history had been curated like a museum exhibit. In a photo from the 90s, I was partially hidden behind Selena. In a Thanksgiving photo, only 3 plates were visible when there should have been 4. Then came the legacy wall. At the center of the giant canvas print were Selena and Logan. Beside them stood their daughter and our parents. I was nowhere to be found. Not even in the caption, "The core of the Carter family." I traced the edge of the frame with my finger. It felt cold and sharp. Back home, I wrote one sentence in my journal: "They didn't forget me, they erased me." Beside it, I circled the date the will had been amended. They rewrote history. And I had let them. Then I opened the folder I had sworn I'd never use. The old documents spread across the kitchen table were like breadcrumbs leading back to a time when I still believed blood equaled loyalty. A cold resolve settled somewhere beneath my ribs. I called Aunt Nina. I thought maybe she would remember things the way they really were. "Aunt Nina, it's Isabel? Heard you made quite a scene at dinner. I just have one question. Did you do anything about the will when Mom was in a critical condition?" "Isabel, she was dying. You need to let this go. It's undignified." "I'm not chasing money. I'm chasing the truth." "You sound ungrateful." Those words landed harder than I expected. "If that's how you feel, that's a shame," I said, and hung up. The next call was to the law office. The receptionist answered with scripted cheer. "I'm sorry. We've been instructed to proceed only through Ms. Selena Carter, the executor of the will." "I'm a legal heir," I said flatly. "That designation does not appear in the final documents, Ms. Carter." I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I ended the call with a calmness that felt colder than anger. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full of all the words I chose not to speak. From a small, dust-covered wooden box tucked between old photo albums on the bookshelf, I carefully pulled out a birthday card my mother had once given me. The envelope was creased and slightly faded at the edges, but her handwriting was still unmistakably hers. Inside, in her familiar looping script, it read, "Don't let anyone tell you this family runs without you." Those words used to make me smile. Now, they burned inside me. I could still picture the day she handed it to me. She was sitting on the porch in her favorite chair, wearing that soft blue sweater, with sunlight falling across her face. Her voice was firm but warm when she said, "They all think they're in charge, but if you didn't clean up after them, they wouldn't last a week." Back then, I laughed. She did too. It felt like an inside joke, our shared understanding of the roles we played in a family that rarely said thank you. But now, those same words echoed like a prophecy, a warning I hadn't been wise enough to heed in time. What once brought comfort now made the back of my throat tighten with unshed tears. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. There was no screaming, no shattered glass, no pounding fists. Instead, I moved with quiet precision. I opened my laptop and launched a spreadsheet that hadn't seen the light of day in months. I began to sort and sift through the data, each line a breadcrumb that led back to the truth. Bank records with outdated signatures. Land deeds buried under layers of revisions. Joint accounts I had once managed now mysteriously closed or reassigned. Every cell on the sheet was a piece of evidence. Every number a memory. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was building a case. One row at a time. Joint accounts I had once held authority over now removed. Every data point was another nail in the coffin of their story. If they wanted to pretend I didn't exist, then I would make sure the land beneath their lies remembered exactly who owned it. If they locked me out of the house, I'd buy the land it stood on. Before bed, I recorded one voicemail. Calm. Cool. Lethal. Selena, I don't want to fight with you. But if you keep pretending I'm not here, I'll become someone you can't ignore. When they shut me out, they forgot I still had the blueprints. 2 mornings after the call to Selena, I logged into the dashboard of a company they'd long forgotten I was ever involved in. Horizon Biotech. A startup I scraped money together to invest in 10 years ago. Back then, they laughed. "You're not cut out for this," Selena said to me. Logan asked, "Do you even know what biotech means?" I didn't need to. I just needed to believe in people who built from nothing. And now, Horizon was on the verge of going public with a valuation over $900 million. There's a certain kind of silence that comes when numbers speak for you. I opened a thread with Horizon's legal team. Subject: clarification of board access. Urgent. Body: I am requesting confirmation of reactivation of my board seat. Also, please initiate the full asset transfer from Dracot Holdings to Horizon Investments and redirect it immediately to 3R Capital Management. The reply came swiftly. Understood, Ms. Carter. You still hold the majority voting rights. I still held them. I remembered having lunch with Logan 2 years ago. I've updated a few of the contracts for you, to take something off your plate. It was a control disguised as concern. I printed an official notice titled, "Intent to Reclaim Joint Holdings Initiated by Isabel Carter," and slipped it into a manila folder. On a sticky note, I scribbled, "I'm not angry. I just woke up." Before I could file it away, the phone rang. A calendar invite. Subject: meeting regarding family legacy. Organizer: assistant to Selena Carter. I tapped accept and whispered, "Let's see how they act when they think they've already won." By the time they noticed my hand, the move had already been made. The invitation to the estate meeting glared at me from the lock screen. The family wanted this to look like business. But cutting someone out of his or her own name is war. I opened my banking app. Error: access restricted. Same with the Joint Legacy Fund. When I contacted the help chat, the reply came, per instructions from the executor, all account changes must be approved through a designated representative. Selena? I opened the family group chat. It was gone. Not archived. Not searchable. They hadn't just blocked my accounts. They deleted me from the digital room. I created a new folder in my secure drive, labeled Prep Alpha 1B, and saved everything: screenshots, error messages with timestamps, emails, copies of the will, notes on the attorney's denials. Then I began rerouting accounts through portals connected to a shell company I had established a decade ago. If they wanted to erase me, they could spend years unraveling the paper trail. By lunch, I had drafted a cease and desist letter. To whom it may concern, continued obstruction of access to any asset, account, or communication under the name Isabel Carter shall be deemed a direct breach of fiduciary duty and will be met with immediate legal action. All incidents are recorded. This is not a warning. It is a declaration. I digitally signed it, CC'd the legal team that once represented my mother, and sent it to Selena's inbox. That evening, a call came from an unknown number. A robotic voice spoke. "We know what you're doing. You made this personal." I didn't hesitate. "I was born into this. You made it personal the day you tried to rewrite my name." And I ended the call. Before the board meeting, they tried to close the curtain on me completely. There was an internal briefing forwarded from someone at Horizon. "In light of recent tensions surrounding the estate, we express concern over Ms. Isabel Carter's health. Her recent behavior suggests a pattern of emotional instability." They didn't call me crazy. They called me fragile. The document misspelled my name Maynard 3 times. A quiet eraser meant to undermine my authority. And then a screenshot from the family thread. She was never all there. Poor Isabel. Selena's message cut deepest. "I'm doing the best I can for her. Someone has to." They were fighting me with whispers, not evidence. The most effective weapon isn't accusation. It's concern. A narrative that makes you look defensive the moment you deny it. Don't explain. Expose. I drafted a statement not from me, but from Horizon's legal team. Founder and financial visionary Isabel Carter remains fully operational and engaged in leadership roles, currently overseeing private estate matters. All internal structures remain intact. It was concise, cold, and enough for those paying attention. The boardroom was a stage screaming curated power. At exactly 9:58 a.m., I stepped in, dressed in charcoal gray, wearing only my mother's watch. Logan sat at the head. Selena beside him. I walked to the far end of the table, opened my laptop without a word, and connected to the screen. The first slide read, "Estate Timeline Review and Discrepancy Log." This is a chronological breakdown of all legal documents related to the Carter estate over the past 10 years. The screen displayed pages, emails, date stamps, IP addresses. Then, a scan of the power of attorney that supposedly gave Logan control over financial assets signed when I was 21. This signature is dated the day I was giving a keynote in Milan. Here's the boarding pass, the time-stamped photo, and the speech transcript. Silence. The screen shifted to the Horizon Biotech dashboard. "Let me show you the status of Trust Account 217A. As of today, it holds assets totaling $1 billion. I paused. One click initiates the transfer. The confirmation screen appeared. Transfer to 3R Capital Holdings, complete. It was in my name. All of it. I could feel the oxygen leave their lungs. Logan stared as if he couldn't do the math. Selena's eyes darted for an exit. "This isn't what Mom would have wanted," she finally said. "No, it's what she prepared for. You just never thought I'd wake up." No one argued. One by one, they left the room in silence. As I gathered my things, a junior board member passed by and slipped a small folded note toward me. "They're planning something. Watch your back." I nodded once. "Let them try," I whispered to myself. "Some truths don't need to be spoken. You live them." The day after the meeting, the news reported Mr. Logan Carter resigns from the Dracot Holdings board, citing personal focus and wellness. They dressed their retreat in silk and called it strategy. That night, I attended a charity gala. During the awards ceremony, the host paused briefly before the name that should have been mine. And then, nothing. They skipped me. I stood still, clapping as if I hadn't noticed. They couldn't refute me, but they still refused to acknowledge I was right. That was their final move. If they couldn't silence me, they would dilute me. I didn't push back. Because silence is not surrender. Sometimes, silence is the sound of a victory so absolute, it leaves no room for debate. A week later, Horizon crossed a $1.2 billion valuation. In sweatpants, alone in my apartment, I signed the documents that made me the majority shareholder. Then I pulled the gala name badge from my desk drawer. It had my name printed as Ms. Maher. I slid beneath it the note my mother left me. "They still don't say my name right," I said aloud. "But they'll never forget who I was. Not every legacy is inherited. Some are rewritten." On Friday morning, a package arrived. Inside was a USB drive labeled in my mother's handwriting, "For Isabella only." I plugged it into my laptop. A grainy video played, recorded weeks before she passed. "Isabel," she said slowly, "I know they've made you feel like a shadow, but you are the light that made this family real." That afternoon, my father came to visit. It had been nearly a year. He handed me a slightly yellowed envelope. "Your mother wrote this a week before she lost her voice. She meant to give it to you. I was afraid. I was a coward." The letter read, "I left instructions for you to lead. If they won't listen, take what is yours. They'll try to erase you. But you always knew where the cracks in the foundation were." I folded the letter and placed it in the small wooden box alongside the USB. Around noon, I found it in my inbox. Subject: Nomination Confirmation, National Women's Leadership Summit. You've been nominated to speak at the annual conference. You were recommended by someone who believes in the power of quiet strength. I clicked accept, closed my laptop, and whispered, "It begins again. This time, on my terms." The ballroom was unlike any room I had ever fought in. Not a family member in sight. Just a sea of unfamiliar faces, interested not in your bloodline but in what you've overcome. My name appeared on the screen spelled correctly this time. "Please welcome Isabel Carter." Applause rose. At the podium, I took a steady breath and paused, letting the silence settle over the room before I spoke. "I never wanted a war," I began, my voice measured, steady, deliberate, each word carrying its own weight. "I only ever wanted a seat at the table. And when that seat wasn't offered, when it was withheld again and again, I didn't wait or beg. I built the table myself, from the ground up. I spoke not just of actions but of absences. Of being edited out of stories I helped write. Of being made invisible in photos where I should have stood. Of the kind of silence that doesn't comfort but erases. And the kind that protects you like armor when no one else will. When I didn't scream, I continued, they called me unstable. When I refused to lower my head, they said I was ungrateful. For a moment, just one, my voice trembled, but I caught it, held it, and pushed forward. "There was a time," I said slowly, "when a man looked straight at me at my face and said, 'We don't serve beggars.'" I let those words linger, hanging in the air like smoke, waiting for them to be fully absorbed. Then I smiled. Not out of bitterness, but with clarity. A smile that knew the difference between being dismissed and being unbothered. "Funny thing is," I said, with a calm almost too sharp to be casual, "now they all line up to serve me." There was a pause. Then a ripple. And then the applause began, slow at first, then rising, then swelling into a rolling, sustained wave that filled the room. I stepped down from the stage, not hurriedly, but with the kind of quiet certainty you can't fake. And I went home. Outside my apartment, the night air felt different, somehow cleaner, stiller. Or maybe I was the one who had changed. The old heaviness in my chest had lifted, replaced by something unfamiliar yet unmistakable, a sense of place. Not just belonging, but ownership. At the mailbox, a small white envelope waited for me. Inside was a simple note. "You spoke for all of us." I read it once, then placed it in the drawer beside my mother's note. "I didn't just survive them," I whispered. "I outgrew them." This is not the end of a name. It's the beginning of a legacy. Sometimes the greatest strength is not in shouting. It's in simply refusing to disappear. If you followed my story from the start, then you know by now. I didn't win because I shouted louder. I won because I stood longer after the shouting stopped. Your worth is not measured by who claps for you. It comes from deeply, quietly knowing who you are, especially when no one is watching.